Everyone in the village remembered the day Adaeze first arrived, barefoot, soaked from the rain, and clinging to the hand of old Mama Ejima like a leaf caught in a storm. No one knew where she came from, or why her golden eyes shimmered like something not quite human. But she grew up quietly, kindly, helping the sick, staying out of trouble, never raising her voice. People talked, of course, about the way animals followed her, about how snakes never beat her, about how the river behind Mama Ejima's hut always flowed strange around her feet. But no one imagined the truth. Not until her wedding night. That was when everything changed. What happened in that small, candlelit hut with her new husband left the entire village speechless and shattered everything they thought they knew about the girl who never belonged. If you enjoy stories that blend mystery, folklore, and deep emotional twists, then settle in. You won't forget this one. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done if you were in Obina's shoes? When Mama Ejima found Adaeze, the skies had just finished weeping. The air still carried the scent of wet earth and hibiscus, and a hush had fallen over the village as if the world itself was holding its breath. She was no more than 6 years old, trembling under the twisted roots of the great Udala tree by the riverbank. Her skin was the color of warm clay, her hair soaked and clinging to her face in tight coils, and her eyes, those eyes, gleamed golden like candlelight trapped in glass. She didn't speak a word, didn't cry, didn't beg. She simply held out her hand to Mama Ejima, as if she had been waiting for her all along. Mama Ejima, the village midwife and herbalist, took her in without question. People said the old woman had her own reasons. Maybe she saw something in Adaeze no one else could. Or maybe she simply knew that some children aren't found by accident. Adaeze became her shadow, learning how to mix herbs, how to treat fevers with boiled leaves, how to recognize the sound of a snake in the tall grass. She was quiet but gentle, often sitting for hours beside the sick, whispering songs no one else knew. Children were drawn to her, though their parents warned them not to get too close. Some said she talked to the wind. Others swore they saw lizards freeze when she passed by. The whispers began early. Strange things happened when Adaeze was near. A blind goat regained its sight after she fed it. A child burning with fever calmed as soon as she laid her hand on his chest. But the strangest of all were the snakes. Not once did the viper raise its head at her. They slithered past her bare feet, curled around her clay pots in the garden, and even coiled under her sleeping mat without ever biting. Mama Ejima dismissed the rumors, saying the girl simply had a calm spirit. But others weren't so sure. Still, Adaeze grew up with grace, never answering insults, never feeding the rumors. She smiled softly, spoke gently, and walked with a poise that didn't match her rough beginnings. By the time she was 16, her beauty was the kind that made people turn twice. Rich brown skin, wide eyes that held secrets, and a voice like cool rain on dry leaves. But there was always something slightly distant about her. Like she was present, but not fully of this world. Like she was waiting. And then came Obina. He was the village carpenter's son, broad-shouldered and bright-eyed, always the first to help at the well and the last to leave the dance circle during festivals. When he set his eyes on Adaeze, he didn't hesitate, and Adaeze, for the first time, looked back. Their courtship would change everything. But no one, not Mama Ejima, not Obina, not even Adaeze herself, was ready for what that love would awaken. Obina had always been the kind of young man mothers prayed for and fathers respected. Hands steady, laughter warm, and a reputation as clean as his well-oiled workbench. He crafted doors that didn't creak, stools that didn't wobble, and toys for children whose families couldn't afford them. Everyone said he would marry the village tailor's daughter Nkem, the pretty one with the full cheeks and quick tongue. It made sense. They had grown up side by side, braided into the same stories, expected to follow the path set before them. But Obina's heart had other plans. He saw Adaeze for the first time, not as the strange girl people whispered about, but as a woman woven with quiet strength. He watched how she tended to wounded animals, how her fingers moved through leaves with the precision of a trained healer, how she held silence without fear. There was something about her stillness, her watchfulness, that unsettled and intrigued him. So he approached her, not with loud confidence, but with gentle persistence. At first, Adaeze kept her distance. She was polite but guarded, never offering more than necessary. She had grown used to being observed, but not truly seen, talked about, but never spoken to directly. Obina, however, didn't shrink from her mystery. He brought her wildflowers instead of jewelry, asked her questions no one else dared, and listened, really listened, when she spoke. Slowly, a softness bloomed between them. Mama Ejima watched with a heavy heart. She knew the village could be cruel, especially to those it did not understand. And she knew that love, though beautiful, often made people careless with secrets meant to stay buried. But Adaeze had never looked happier. She laughed more, stood taller, and sometimes hummed songs with a lilt in her voice that even Mama Ejima didn't recognize. It didn't take long for the rumors to catch fire. People warned Obina, first gently, then urgently. "She's not like us," they said. "You don't know where she came from. She walks alone for a reason." But Obina would not be moved. He defended her with the same calm firmness he used to plain rough wood. "You don't know her," he would reply. "You've never tried." Adaeze, touched by his loyalty, began to hope for a life she had never dared to imagine. For the first time, she allowed herself to dream of white cloth, of drums playing through the night, of laughter echoing through a shared home. She told herself that maybe she could finally belong. But Mama Ejima knew the river never gives without asking something in return. And love, especially love that comes too close to the truth, can unravel the threads of fate in ways no one can control. Still, the wedding was announced, and beneath the joy and celebration, something ancient stirred, watching, waiting. Preparations for the wedding swept through the village like dry leaves caught in harmattan winds, loud, fast, and impossible to ignore. Drummers were hired, the women began weaving Adaeze's ceremonial wrapper, and even the chief's wife offered to lend her golden beads as a token of rare approval. To many, it seemed like a miracle. The girl, no one trusted, the one wrapped in shadows, was finally being accepted, brought into the light by Obina's unwavering love. But miracles, as the elders say, often have a cost hidden behind their shine. It began with the palm wine tapper, a hunched old man with cloudy eyes and a mouth that rarely spoke unless the spirits pressed him. One evening, as Obina passed him on the narrow bush path, he paused. "Your bride, she walks like water on stone," he muttered. "Beautiful to watch, but you never know what's beneath." Obina laughed it off, assuming it was another poetic jab, a veiled warning. He was used to it by now, used to the stares, the whispers, the lingering questions no one dared ask Adaeze to her face. Then came the dreams. Mama Ejima awoke several nights in a row, with her throat dry and her chest tight, visions clinging to her like wet cloth. Dreams of Adaeze standing by the riverbank at midnight, speaking a language no human tongue should know, her eyes glowing like dying embers. She saw a serpent coiled around her feet, not threatening, but guarding her, protecting something sacred or something cursed. She didn't want to believe it, but her instincts screamed louder than logic. She begged Adaeze to call the wedding off, to leave the village with her before it was too late. "I cannot," Adaeze replied quietly, her voice tinged with a sorrow Mama Ejima hadn't heard before. "This is the life I've chosen. I want to be loved, even if only for a while." Others noticed strange things too. The young boy who fetched water from the stream swore he saw Adaeze's reflection blink when she did not. A goat refused to pass her compound at dusk. A baby wailed each time Adaeze walked past. One woman claimed her clay pot cracked on its own when Adaeze stepped into her hut. Still, the villagers said nothing directly. Some watched with wide eyes. Others shrugged and muttered, "If Obina doesn't mind, why should we?" Obina, so wrapped in devotion, dismissed it all. "Superstition," he said. "They fear what they don't understand." And Adaeze, with her haunting smile, said nothing. She only held his hand tighter each day, as if trying to delay the inevitable. But even the strongest hand cannot hold back a tide forever. And the river, patient and ancient, never forgets the promises it's owed. Preparations for the wedding swept through the village like dry leaves caught in harmattan winds, loud, fast, and impossible to ignore. Drummers were hired, the women began weaving Adaize's ceremonial wrapper, and even the chief's wife offered to lend her golden beads as a token of rare approval. To many, it seemed like a miracle. The girl, no one trusted, the one wrapped in shadows, was finally being accepted, brought into the light by Obina's unwavering love. But miracles, as the elders say, often have a cost hidden behind their shine. It began with the palm wine tapper, a hunched old man with cloudy eyes and a mouth that rarely spoke unless the spirits pressed him. One evening, as Obina passed him on the narrow bush path, he paused. "Your bride, she walks like water on stone," he muttered. "Beautiful to watch, but you never know what's beneath." Obina laughed it off, assuming it was another poetic jab, a veiled warning. He was used to it by now, used to the stares, the whispers, the lingering questions no one dared ask Adaize to her face. Then came the dreams. Mama Ejima awoke several nights in a row, with her throat dry and her chest tight, visions clinging to her like wet cloth. Dreams of Adaize standing by the riverbank at midnight, speaking a language no human tongue should know, her eyes glowing like dying embers. She saw a serpent coiled around her feet, not threatening, but guarding her, protecting something sacred or something cursed. She didn't want to believe it, but her instincts screamed louder than logic. She begged Adaize to call the wedding off, to leave the village with her before it was too late. "I cannot," Adaize replied quietly, her voice tinged with a sorrow Mama Ejima hadn't heard before. "This is the life I've chosen. I want to be loved, even if only for a while." Others noticed strange things too. The young boy who fetched water from the stream swore he saw Adaize's reflection blink when she did not. A goat refused to pass her compound at dusk. A baby wailed each time Adaize walked past. One woman claimed her clay pot cracked on its own when Adaize stepped into her hut. Still, the villagers said nothing directly. Some watched with wide eyes. Others shrugged and muttered, "If Obina doesn't mind, why should we?" Obina, so wrapped in devotion, dismissed it all. "Superstition," he said. "They fear what they don't understand." And Adaize, with her haunting smile, said nothing. She only held his hand tighter each day, as if trying to delay the inevitable. But even the strongest hand cannot hold back a tide forever. And the river, patient and ancient, never forgets the promises it's owed. The sun dipped slowly behind the hills, draping the village in golden warmth as laughter and music filled the air. Women danced with swaying hips as they stirred pots over open flames, the aroma of pepper soup and roasted yam carrying into the distance. Children ran through the compound with chalk on their faces, rehearsing songs they'd perform at the ceremony. It was a celebration as grand as any royal wedding. And yet, beneath the clinking of calabashes and the chatter of relatives, there was a subtle tension, like a thread pulled too tight, ready to snap. Adaize sat quietly in her room, her bridal wrapper folded beside her, untouched. A small fire crackled in the corner, casting flickering shadows against the mud walls. Mama Ejima entered without a word, her face pale from lack of sleep, her fingers clutching a string of prayer beads. She had tried everything: rituals, silent fasts, whispered warnings to the spirits, but nothing had changed. The signs were still there, the dreams hadn't stopped. And Adaize seemed to be fading, not physically, but inwardly, as if some part of her was slipping away the closer morning approached. "My daughter," Mama Ejima began, kneeling beside her, "there's still time to stop this. I can pack our things tonight. We can disappear before dawn. You don't have to go through with it." But Adaize only smiled gently, her eyes glistening. "I have waited too long to feel human," she whispered. "To be held, to be loved without suspicion. If this is all the time I am allowed, let me have it." The words silenced Mama Ejima, who wept softly, her head bowed to the ground. Elsewhere, Obina was surrounded by his friends, teasing him with laughter and loud toasts. "Your Ades is different, oh," one friend said, elbowing him. "But as long as she makes you happy, that's all that matters." Obina raised his calabash, His smile wide but tired. Something inside him had begun to ache, a heaviness he couldn't name. He hadn't slept much. The old man's words echoed in his thoughts, his mother's hesitation, the odd glances. But every time doubt crept in, he remembered how Ades looked at him, with a kind of fragile hope that made him want to build a world just for her. As the moon rose high above the village, casting silver shadows on the clay rooftops, the drums quieted, fires were doused. Guests retired to their homes with full bellies and excited murmurs of the day to come. But in two separate homes, two hearts beat restlessly. In one, a man prayed he had chosen love for the right reasons. In the other, a woman held tightly to a secret she had kept for years, one that would unravel everything by sunrise. Dawn broke like a slow drumbeat, steady and full of promise. Sunlight stretched its golden fingers across the red earth as the village awakened with excitement. Smoke curled from kitchen huts, women tied gel in front of mirrors made from cracked glass, and children ran barefoot shouting, "Today is the day." There was a humming in the air, a festive pulse that made the birds sing louder and the goats restless in their pens. The wedding of Obina and Adaeze was no longer a story whispered in corners. It had become the village's proud moment. Obina stood tall in his ceremonial wrapper, his wrists wrapped with coral beads, his sandals new and stiff. His friends clapped him on the back, and his father stood at his side with a rare look of pride. But deep within, Obina felt a strange quietness. Not fear, not quite, just a stillness he could not shake, like standing on a riverbank, too calm for comfort. At Mama Ejima's hut, Adaeze was being adorned with care. Her skin was dusted with powdered camwood, and her lips were stained a deep shade of red. Her wrapper, woven with threads of gold, hugged her figure like it was made only for her. The village women praised her beauty with songs, some genuinely admiring, others with veiled tones, unsure whether to envy her or fear her. Mama Ejima kept to herself, her eyes never leaving her daughter, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her wrapper. Adaiz said little. She smiled when she was told to, turned when she was asked, but her mind was distant. She could feel the weight of time pressing on her chest, every heartbeat echoing louder than the last. The secret that had stayed buried like a stone in her belly was now crawling upward, aching to surface. But not yet. Not until the sun reached its highest point. Not until the final vow was spoken. The ceremony began with chants and drumming. The village square overflowed with guests dressed in bright colors. Palm fronds were tied to the canopies, and kola nuts were passed between families. Obina took Adaizi's hand in his, steady and proud. When she walked toward him, the entire village fell silent. Her presence commanded the air. Not just because of her beauty, but because something else, something older, something not quite human, seemed to move with her, just beneath the surface. When the chief blessed their union and the final cheer went up, people threw cowries and flowers in the air. They danced, clapped, and cheered as the couple made their way to the groom's family compound. Food was served in abundance, drums thundered, and ululations carried into the sky. But as the sun dipped low once more, and guests began to leave with full bellies and glowing hearts, a quiet hush fell over the compound. The laughter faded into whispers. The door to Obina's hut closed behind him and his new bride. The village celebrated a love story, unaware that nightfall would uncover something far more ancient than love. The night was warm, thick with the lingering scent of jollof rice and the smoky drift of burnt firewood. Crickets sang their steady rhythm in the background, and the last of the wedding drums had gone silent. In the compound, Obina's family had retired one by one, their hearts content, their feet sore from dancing. But inside the small, candle-lit hut, where the new couple now stood alone, the atmosphere had changed. The air was no longer joyful. It had grown tense, almost fragile, like it could split open with the wrong word. Obina sat on the edge of the bed, his hands clasped together. His eyes followed Adaize's as she moved slowly, her wrapper rustling faintly with each step. She looked beautiful, radiant even, but something was off. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Her body moved with grace, but her steps seemed rehearsed. And that silence, Obina had never felt a silence so loud before. He reached out and touched her hand. Are you all right? He asked, his voice soft, uncertain. Adaize looked down at him, her expression unreadable. Then she turned away, walking toward the window, where the moonlight spilled in like silver milk. Her fingers gripped the window sill, and for a moment, she stood frozen. Something inside her was shifting. He could feel it. Obina rose and came toward her. You don't have to be nervous, he said, trying to offer comfort, trying to understand. We are husband and wife now. She let out a faint breath, more like a sigh than a laugh. Then, without turning, she said, Obina, there is something I must tell you. His heart stilled. She finally turned to face him, and the candle's flame flickered. Her shadow danced wildly on the walls behind her. I've hidden this for as long as I can remember. Mama Ejima told me to bury it, to pretend it wasn't part of me. But it is. And now, before this night goes further, you deserve to know the truth. Obina swallowed hard. What truth? Adaize stepped closer. The air around her changed. It grew colder. The smell of something earthy, like wet leaves, and old stone, began to seep into the room. Her eyes locked with his, and they shimmered, no longer just brown, but flecked with a strange, almost golden light. I am not like other women, she whispered. The wind outside suddenly stirred, brushing the curtains aside. The moonlight fell fully on her face, illuminating the tear that slid slowly down her cheek. She held her hands out, and for a fleeting second, her fingers seemed to ripple, their shape wavering like heat rising off a road. Obina blinked. Was it a trick of the light? He stepped back instinctively. What are you? He asked, voice trembling. Adaize didn't answer. Instead, the silence returned. Only this time, it was heavy with knowing, a breath away from truth, a second before revelation. And outside the hut, the moon gazed down without blinking, its pale eye watching what even the stars dared not speak of. Obina couldn't move. His feet were planted firmly to the ground, not by force, but by fear, a fear he couldn't explain. Not yet. He watched Adaize carefully, his heart pounding so hard it echoed in his ears. Everything about her was the same, and yet completely unfamiliar. Her voice still sounded like her own, gentle and warm, but laced now with something ancient, something cold and distant. She walked toward him, and with every step, he saw it. Her shape shimmered faintly, like ripples on a still pond, disturbed by an invisible breeze. The fabric of her wrapper clung to her body as if afraid to fall, as though it too had learned to be wary of what lay beneath. Then, she stopped just an arm's length away and looked at him with an unbearable softness, as though she regretted everything, every smile, every kiss, every lie. I was born in the deep forest, she began, where the trees never let light in, where my mother gave birth to me in secret, far from the eyes of men. She was one of them, a guardian of the old ways, a creature of two forms, woman and serpent. My father never knew. She vanished before I was weaned, leaving me in the care of Mama Ejima, who swore to hide what I was. Obina's mouth opened, but no words came. He felt like the world was suddenly spinning in reverse. Adaize took a deep breath, her voice trembling for the first time. I have never harmed anyone, Obina, never shed blood, never cursed a soul. I live like everyone else, but I was born with a mark. Without waiting, she slowly unwrapped the cloth from her waist, letting it fall to the floor. Beneath the soft glow of moonlight and candle, the mark came into view. A dark, shimmering scale, no larger than a coin, sat just above her hip. Obina stared. It pulsed faintly, like it had a heartbeat of its own. His hands trembled. This is witchcraft. Adaize shook her head quickly. No, it's blood. It's who I am. I've hidden it all my life, but I couldn't hide from the truth forever. Not after marrying you. I thought love would wash it away. That if I buried it deep enough, it would die inside me. But it never did. Obina turned away, pacing, then gripping his head with both hands. So all this time, all these months, you've been lying? I didn't know how to tell you, she said softly. How do you explain something like this without being feared? Burned? Cast out? I've lived in silence for so long. I almost forgot how to speak my truth. For a long while, there was only silence again. Obina stood with his back to her, his body stiff. Adais didn't cry. She simply waited. Because if there was one thing she had learned, it was that truth takes time to digest, especially when it slithers through the heart like a snake through dry leaves. Finally, Obina spoke. You should have told me before the wedding. Her heart sank. I know. He turned face pale. I don't know what to do. Neither did she, but the night wasn't over, and what came next would test them both in ways neither could have imagined. The dawn never came that morning, or at least it didn't feel like it did. The sky remained bruised and grey, as if the sun itself refused to rise over what had been revealed the night before. Obina sat at the edge of the bed, head in his hands, wrestling with the storm in his chest. The air between him and Adais was thick with silence, not the kind that comes from peace, but the kind that follows shock. Every breath they took felt too loud, every glance too sharp. Adaize hadn't slept. She didn't even try. She sat on the floor beside the bed, arms wrapped around her knees like a child, her eyes never leaving the small wooden window that looked out into the restless morning. The house felt like it was holding its breath, waiting. And then came the knock. It wasn't the kind of knock that asked for permission. It landed hard, once, twice, then stopped. Obina and Adaize both froze, their eyes meeting. No one ever came to visit them this early, especially not the day after a wedding, and certainly not with that kind of knock. He moved slowly toward the door, heart hammering. Who's there? A voice answered from behind the wooden frame, low and raspy. You know who? Obina swallowed hard. He knew that voice, though it hadn't been heard in years. Mama Ejima, the midwife who had raised Adais in the village outskirts. The one everyone said had gone mad years ago, rambling about spirits in the forest and children born with shadows. No one had seen her in months. Some believed she died in the bush. Others said she'd become one with the creatures she once feared. Adaize stood immediately, her hands trembling. Obina let her in. He hesitated, but something in Adaize's voice made him obey. He lifted the latch and slowly opened the door. Mama Ejima stood there barefoot, her wrapper clinging to her like a second skin, eyes glowing faintly under the hood of her shawl. Time had not touched her gently. Her face was carved by years of worry and secrets, but her spine was straight, her presence sharp. She stepped inside without a word, walking past them both and placing a small leather pouch on the table. It smelled of earth and smoke. You told him? She asked, without turning. Adais nodded silently. And he didn't run. Obina opened his mouth to speak, but Mama Ejima raised her hand to silence him. No need for words, boy. This isn't about judgment. It's about protection. She untied the pouch, spilling its contents onto the table. Dried leaves, bones, and a single black stone, smooth as glass. I knew this day would come, she said. They know the bloodline has awakened. The forest has already stirred. Obina blinked. Who's they? Mama Ejima looked up, her eyes grave. The ones who want her back. The ones who never forget their own. You thought marrying her would change your life. But the truth is, it just lit a torch in the dark. And now, everything is coming for the flame. Adais felt a chill crawl down her spine. She had hidden for so long, dared to dream of a normal life, dared to love. But now, with Mama Ejima's words hanging heavy in the air, she realized her wedding night wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. The air inside the house grew heavier as the strange items from Mama Ejima's pouch lay spread on the table. Obina couldn't stop staring at the black stone. It shimmered faintly even in the dim light, as though pulsing with a heartbeat of its own. He wanted to dismiss it as just some old village ritual, some superstition from forgotten times. But the way Adaize stood frozen, and the way Mama Ejima moved with absolute certainty, told him this was no myth. It was real, all of it. You said they're coming, Obina said, his voice strained. Who are they? What do they want with my wife? Mama Ejima's hands moved quickly, crushing dried leaves into a powder with the stone. You think you know who she is because you married her. But love doesn't erase blood, and hers is not ordinary. Her mother was one of them, the ones who live between worlds, who speak in tongues the wind understands. She was cursed and chosen in the same breath, and Adaizes inherited what her mother could no longer contain. Adaize lowered her eyes. I tried to leave that behind, to build something different, to live like I wasn't them. Mama Ejima glanced at her sharply. But they never forget. They mark their own Adaize. You may walk among humans, eat their food, wear their clothes, but you will never be one of them fully, not while your veins carry their gift. Obina's hands curled into fists. Then we'll fight them. Whatever this is, whatever's coming, we'll face it together. The old woman let out a dry, humorless laugh. You don't fight them, child. You survive them. You negotiate. You hide. You don't challenge what was born in shadow and nursed in the belly of the earth. Then she turned to Adaize. Last night was the warning. They let you reveal yourself because now they know where to find you. Your wedding was not just witnessed by men. It was seen by eyes that haven't blinked in 100 years. They know you chose love. And that, to them, is betrayal. Adaize shivered. Then what do I do? Mama Ejima reached into her shawl and pulled out an old carved ring made of serpent bone. Its surface was etched with symbols neither of them recognized. You wear this when the sky turns red and the wind howls with no breeze. You do not speak. You do not run. You do not pray like a human. You remember who you are, and for that moment you become them. Obina stepped forward. She doesn't have to become anything. She's my wife. Mama Ejima looked at him with eyes that had seen more than lifetimes. Then prepare yourself, son of men, because the forest remembers, and the forest does not forgive. A low rumble echoed in the distance. Thunder? Or something else? Obina looked toward the window, then back at Adaize. Her face was pale, her jaw clenched. She didn't want this. But some doors, once opened, never close, and some names, once spoken, awaken old gods. They had stepped into something far older than themselves, and the real test of their love was only just beginning. That night, the village slept unaware, beneath a sky thick with clouds that refused to rain. A strange stillness blanketed the air. No crickets chirped, no leaves rustled. Even the dogs that usually barked at shadows curled in silence as if sensing something that did not belong. Inside their home, Obina sat by the window, watching the horizon. He had locked every door, burned the leaves Mama Ejima gave him, and drawn the protective symbols around the house exactly as she instructed. Yet, no ritual could soothe the storm building inside him. He had never felt so helpless. Adaize was in the bedroom, seated cross-legged on the floor, the serpent bone ring clutched tightly in her hand. She wore a simple white wrapper, her hair loose, her face stripped of all adornment. She looked like a bride again, but this time not for celebration, for sacrifice. Her heart beat wildly beneath her ribs, not out of fear, but anticipation. They were coming. She could feel it. Not on the earth, not in the wind, but inside her, pulling her back toward the place she had fought so hard to escape. Obina entered the room quietly and knelt beside her. Whatever happens, you stay with me. Promise me that. I can't promise that, she whispered, but I'll try. Then the sky cracked, not with lightning, but with a tearing sound, like something ancient had split open. The house trembled. The air grew hot and heavy. The symbols on the floor began to glow faintly, and somewhere deep in the earth, beneath them, something stirred. Obina rose to his feet, just as the light bulbs flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. And then, the knock. One single knock at the door, followed by silence. Obina's breath caught in his throat. Another knock, so gentle, it was almost polite, but it carried weight, as though it came from something too heavy for the earth. Adaize stood and slipped on the ring. Her eyes no longer shimmered with fear. They were different now, slitted, golden, inhuman. She looked at him and said nothing. Her silence was filled with things she couldn't put into words. Love, regret, warning. Obina reached for her hand, but she was already walking to the door. No, he whispered. Not tonight. Please. She paused, turned to him, and gave a small, sad smile. It was always going to be tonight. As she opened the door, the wind rushed in, Wild and furious, though the trees outside stood still, figures emerged, not walking, but gliding, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Shapes that bent the light around them, clothed in nothing but shadow and memory. They did not speak. They didn't have to. They had come to take her home. But then Adaize stepped outside and stood between them and Obina. I choose him, she said, her voice no longer hers alone but layered, ancient, thunderous. I remember who I am, but I choose him. The figures paused. For a moment, nothing moved. Then one of them stepped forward, a towering shape with eyes like burning coals. It reached out and touched her cheek, not to harm, but to remind. You may walk with them, he said, voice like wind through graveyards. But the forest will call again, and next time, love will not be enough. With that, they vanished. The night grew quiet again. The door swung shut. Adaize collapsed into Obina's arms, shaking. The wedding night was over, but the vow she had made echoed louder than any celebration. Not all battles are won with swords. Some are won by standing still when your past comes to claim you. And a days had chosen. For now, love had won. But for how long? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below. Would you have opened that door or turned and run?